She was the undisputed queen of the sky, until a desperate radio transmission cut to static. Beyond the vanished plane lies the harrowing truth of Amelia Earhart's final hours, and the devastating cost of her ultimate dream. The static is deafening, a wall of white noise screaming across the vast, empty expanse of the mid-Pacific. It is the morning of July 2, 1937, and aboard the United States Coast Guard cutter Itasca, anchored off the microscopic speck of Howland Island, radio operators strain their ears. Through the crackle of the high-frequency band, a voice cuts through, urgent, breathless, and dangerously close. It is Amelia Earhart. Calling Itasca, she transmits, her voice rising above the roar of her twin Pratt & Whitney engines. "We must be on you, but cannot see you. Fuel is running low." On the deck of the Itasca, officers look out over a blindingly bright, empty horizon. They know the twin-engine Lockheed Electra, carrying Earhart and her brilliant but troubled navigator, Fred Noonan, is flying on fumes. They have been in the air for over 20 exhausting hours, clawing their way across 3,000 miles of trackless ocean from New Guinea. Howland Island is their only hope, a strip of sand just 2 miles long and a half-mile wide, utterly invisible in the vast, glittering desert of the Pacific Ocean. At 8:43 a.m., another transmission tears through the static, the most desperate yet. "We are on the line 157-337. We are running on line north and south." And then, nothing. Only the hiss of the atmosphere. The Itasca frantically broadcasts back, sending thick plumes of black smoke into the clear blue sky to serve as a beacon, but the radio remains stubbornly, terrifyingly silent. In an instant, the triumphant final leg of an historic round-the-world flight dissolves into a chilling emergency. How could the world's most famous female aviator, equipped with modern technology and backed by the resources of the American government, simply vanish into thin air? As the minutes tick into agonizing hours, the realization sets in that the Electra has gone down. But where? Did they crash into the unforgiving depths of the ocean floor, or did they find refuge on some unnamed reef, waiting for a rescue that would never arrive? The search that was about to begin would become the largest in naval history, but the answers would remain locked in the deep, launching a century-long obsession with a single, haunting question: what really happened to the Queen of the Sky in her final, silent hours? By 1937, Amelia Earhart was not just a pilot, she was a global phenomenon. Her face graced billboards, her name defined modern courage, and her iconic cropped hair and leather jacket symbolized an era of limitless potential. Yet, she wanted more than mere fame. She sought a final, defining triumph, to circumnavigate the globe along its longest, most grueling path, the equator. This was a grueling 29,000-mile journey that would push human endurance and mechanical reliability to their absolute limits. To conquer this ultimate frontier, she secured a state-of-the-art twin-engine masterpiece, the Lockheed Electra Model 10E. Dubbed her Flying Laboratory, this sleek, silver beast was heavily retrofitted with massive extra fuel tanks, trading passenger comfort for raw, long-range power. But flying blind over trackless oceans required more than a powerful machine, it demanded flawless navigation. Enter Fred Noonan. A brilliant but troubled former Pan-American navigator, Noonan was a master of marine and aerial navigation, one of the few men alive capable of guiding a plane across the featureless expanses of the Pacific using only the stars and a handheld sextant. Together, this unlikely duo captured the world's imagination. As they mapped their eastbound route from Oakland, California, through South America, Africa, India, and Southeast Asia, millions watched in breathless anticipation. Aviation was the high-tech frontier of the 1930s, and Earhart was its undisputed queen. Every takeoff was a front-page sensation, every landing, a festival of cheering crowds. The atmosphere was electric, thick with the belief that human ingenuity could conquer any barrier. Yet, behind the flashing cameras and the triumphant smiles, a quiet dread lingered among those who understood the brutal mathematics of the flight. The equatorial route was a path of extreme peril, offering absolutely no margin for error over the vast, empty stretches of the world's largest oceans. They had the fame, the state-of-the-art aircraft, and the finest navigator money could buy. But as the Electra roared down the runway, heading toward the treacherous stepping stones of the Pacific, they were flying directly into a meteorological and logistical nightmare. Could even the world's most celebrated aviator survive the unforgiving void that lay ahead, or were they already flying on borrowed time? The roar of the engines cut through the humid New Guinea dawn. It was July 2, 1937. From the crude airstrip at La, Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan launched into the vast, unforgiving expanse of the Pacific. Their destination, a tiny, mile-and-a-half-long sliver of coral called Howland Island, 2,556 miles away. This was it, the most perilous leg of their round-the-world journey, an 18-hour endurance test against the elements, navigation, and time itself. The Lockheed Electra 10E, heavily laden with fuel, clawed its way into the sky. Every ounce of gasoline was precious, meticulously calculated for the grueling flight. Their lifeline across the featureless ocean wasn't a modern GPS, but Fred Noonan's masterful, yet fallible, celestial navigation. He would use a sextant, peering at the sun and stars through a tiny window, attempting to plot their course with a precision that seemed impossible at 10,000 feet, often through clouds or turbulence. As the hours bled into one another, the initial hope began to fray. Communication with their crucial guide, the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Itasca, stationed off Howland Island, proved maddeningly intermittent. Conflicting frequencies, static, and the sheer distance turned vital radio exchanges into a frustrating game of broken whispers. Earhart, ever the pragmatist, understood the stakes. Fuel was finite. Every minute spent off course, every missed radio beacon, pushed them closer to the abyss. Night fell, then gave way to a false dawn. The sun, a critical navigational aid, played hide-and-seek with the clouds. Noonan's calculations, despite his expertise, could only provide a line of position, a directional line on which they might be located, not a precise point. As the Itasca desperately tried to triangulate their position, receiving fleeting, often garbled messages, the urgency in Amelia's voice grew palpable. "We must be on you, but cannot see you," she transmitted, her words tinged with a growing desperation. "Gas is running low." The minutes stretched into an eternity. Below them, somewhere in the vast blue, lay Howland Island, an invisible needle in an oceanic haystack. Despite the Itasca's efforts to send smoke signals, despite their own frantic low-altitude passes, the island remained elusive. The last confirmed radio message from Amelia Earhart came at 8:43 a.m. local time. Her words, fragmented and fading, spoke of being on the 157 to 337 line, heading north and south. Then, chillingly, silence. The Queen of the Sky, along with her navigator, had vanished. What happened in those final, desperate moments, as the fuel gauges dropped to empty and the horizon offered no salvation? The largest search in U.S. naval history was about to begin, but for now, only questions remained. The dawn of July 2, 1937, brought not the relief of a new day, but a mounting dread across the vast, featureless Pacific. Below, the tiny speck of Howland Island, their intended haven, remained stubbornly invisible. Above, the Electra, carrying Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan, was running on fumes, and hope was running just as low. Aboard the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Itasca, stationed off Howland, the tension was palpable. Radio operators, their ears aching, strained to catch any coherent signal from the flyers. They transmitted relentlessly, a constant, guiding hum on 7,500 kilocycles, but their calls went unheard. Earhart, it seemed, could transmit, but not receive, a catastrophic, one-way conversation playing out over hundreds of miles of open water. At 6:14 a.m. local time, Earhart's voice crackled through, clear enough to convey her position relative to a line of bearing. Then, at 7:42 a.m., a chilling message: "We are on the line of position 157 to 337. We are running north and south." They were lost. They knew their bearing, but not their precise location along it. The directional radio beacon on Howland, their last best hope, either failed or was misunderstood, leaving them blind. Fuel exhaustion, once a distant threat, now loomed as an imminent certainty. Every tick of the clock was a gallon burned, a mile unreached. The desperation in Earhart's voice became increasingly evident. "We are running on line north and south," she reported again, "and we are about 100 miles north." A later transmission, barely intelligible, mentioned half an hour more fuel. The Itasca tried everything, smoke signals, every radio frequency, but the void answered only with static. Then, at 8:43 a.m., the final, fragmented words, a garbled, urgent plea about being on the line 157, followed by a sudden, terrifying silence. Just like that, the airwaves went dead. The voice of the Queen of the Sky, and her navigator, Fred Noonan, vanished, swallowed by the immense, indifferent Pacific. The silence that descended was not just the absence of a radio signal, it was the sudden, crushing weight of an unanswerable question. What happened in those final moments? Did they ditch? Did they land on some unknown atoll? The largest search in U.S. naval history would begin within hours, but the vastness of the ocean held its secrets close, secrets that would launch 1,000 theories and haunt generations, begging for an explanation that, even today, remains tantalizingly out of reach. The moment the static cleared and the silence became absolute, a superpower mobilized. Within hours of the final, desperate radio transmissions from the Electra, President Franklin D. Roosevelt authorized a rescue operation of unprecedented, historic proportions. This was no routine patrol, it was a full-scale military mobilization in the middle of the unforgiving Pacific. The United States Navy and Coast Guard threw their full, formidable weight into the search, launching a desperate race against time that would capture the attention of a worried world. At the heart of this armada was the USS Lexington, a massive aircraft carrier loaded with search planes, alongside the battleship USS Colorado and the Coast Guard cutter Itasca, which had waited in vain at Howland Island. Together with a fleet of destroyers and support vessels, they carved through the swells, their spotters scanning the endless blue horizon until their eyes burned. Over 4,000 sailors and aviators became the eyes of a nation, scouring a staggering 250,000 square miles of open ocean. Every crest of a wave, every floating piece of debris, and every shadow on the water triggered a surge of adrenaline, only to end in crushing disappointment. For 16 grueling days, the searchers braved treacherous equatorial heat, sudden squalls, and the sheer, dizzying vastness of the sea. Planes launched from the decks of the Lexington flew dangerous, low-altitude sweeps, tracing grid after grid, looking for a flash of aluminum, an oil slick, or the bright orange of a life raft. On the Colorado, catapult planes launched into the sky to search the remote reefs and islets of the Phoenix Islands. They pushed themselves and their machines to the absolute limit, driven by the hope that the world's most famous aviator and her skilled navigator, Fred Noonan, were clinging to life on some forgotten speck of coral. Yet, despite costing millions of dollars and covering an area larger than many nations, the massive dragnet yielded absolutely nothing. No wreckage, no oil slicks, no empty life rafts, and no trace of the silver Lockheed Electra. The ocean remained stubbornly, terrifyingly blank. As the search was finally called off, a chilling realization set in: how could something so colossal vanish so completely? And if the sea hadn't swallowed them whole, where on earth had they gone? As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the vast Pacific in hues of despair, the reality facing Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan grew starker with every passing minute. Their Lockheed Electra, a marvel of its age, was a tiny metallic bird lost in an immense, featureless sky, its fuel gauges steadily, terrifyingly, dropping. For decades, the most straightforward, and perhaps most tragic, explanation for their disappearance has been brutally simple: they ran out of gas, plunged into the ocean, and sank without a trace. Their destination, tiny Howland Island, was a mere speck in an ocean larger than all the Earth's land masses combined. Navigating to it demanded pinpoint accuracy, a challenge compounded by exhausted minds, the primitive navigation tools of the era, and the sheer fatigue of a flight stretching over 18 hours. Miscalculations, even slight deviations from their intended course, would have pushed them beyond the Electra's critical fuel range. Adding to this peril were the unpredictable squalls and shifting winds that often plagued the equatorial Pacific, capable of both increasing fuel consumption and throwing an aircraft far off its intended track without warning. Imagine the deafening roar of the engines giving way to an eerie, gut-wrenching silence, the sudden, desperate realization that the propellers had stopped turning. In that moment, the Electra would have become an unpowered glider, its fate sealed. A water landing, even a controlled one, in the open, deep ocean is catastrophic. The impact forces are immense, often tearing aircraft apart, and what remains would quickly succumb to the unforgiving sea. The Pacific Ocean, in the region where Earhart and Noonan vanished, plummets to depths of thousands of feet, sometimes miles. At those crushing pressures, any wreckage would be compressed, scattered, and utterly swallowed by the abyssal darkness, making recovery efforts then, and even now, an almost impossible endeavor. The ocean, vast and indifferent, became their final resting place, concealing its secrets beneath an impenetrable veil of water and time. This grim scenario, devoid of sensationalism, is the prevailing orthodoxy because it aligns with the harsh realities of pioneering long-distance flight. It requires no elaborate conspiracy, no far-fetched theories, just the tragic confluence of human error, mechanical limits, and the sheer scale of an unforgiving natural world. The absence of a single tangible piece of wreckage, despite the largest search in naval history, sadly lends credence to the idea that the Electra simply, utterly, vanished beneath the waves. But did the ocean truly claim them immediately? Or did it, in its vastness, offer a fleeting, agonizing reprieve before its final embrace? For 3 days after the Lockheed Electra vanished, the radio waves did not go silent. Instead, they crackled with phantom voices. Across the Pacific, and even in the heart of the American mainland, amateur radio operators picked up desperate, weak distress signals. A woman's voice, sounding exhausted, repeating her call sign, CAC. She warned of rising tides, of a landing on a reef, of heat and desperate thirst. While the Navy dismissed these as hoaxes, one group of modern investigators looked at the map differently. Enter the International Group for Historic Aircraft Recovery, or TIRE. They plotted these post-loss radio signals and realized they pointed not to the deep ocean basin near Howland, but to a remote, uninhabited sliver of coral 350 miles to the south, Gardner Island, now known as Nikumaroro. Here, the flat reef would have been dry enough at low tide to land a twin-engine plane, but as the water rose, the aircraft would have been swept into the abyss, leaving its occupants stranded. This is the castaway theory, a haunting alternative to a sudden watery grave. On this sun-scorched atoll, researchers have uncovered tantalizing clues that suggest someone survived. They found the remains of campfires, bones of native birds and fish, a brass zipper slide, a piece of a woman's compact, and even fragments of a jar believed to contain a popular American freckle ointment from the 1930s. Most shocking of all were the archival records of 13 human bones found on the island in 1940, initially identified as male, but later analyzed by modern forensic anthropologists who concluded they closely matched the height and proportions of Amelia Earhart herself. Imagine the terror of those final days, sheltering under the sparse shade of beach heliotrope trees, battling dehydration, watching the horizon for ships that never came, while giant coconut crabs swarmed the darkness. It is a cinematic nightmare of survival and slow demise. Yet, if Nikumaroro is indeed the final resting place of the world's most famous aviator, why has the island refused to yield its ultimate secret? Where is the smoking gun, the undeniable piece of the Electra that would finally close the case? The answer might lie not on the island's parched soil, but deep beneath the treacherous surf. Deep in the uninhabited, sun-scorched brush of Nikumaroro, archaeological teams uncovered what appeared to be a desperate last campsite, designated the Seven Site. Here, beneath the sparse canopy of buka trees, the dry Pacific soil surrendered clues that paint a haunting picture of human survival. Among the ashes of long-dead campfires lay the fragmented, charred bones of nesting birds, turtles, and native clams, harvested by someone struggling to stay alive on an island completely devoid of fresh surface water. But the physical evidence gets far more specific, pointing directly to a female castaway. Scatterings of American-made artifacts began to emerge from the dirt, pieces of a pocket knife, a brass zipper pulled from a flight jacket, glass jars identical to 1930s cosmetic containers, and, perhaps most chillingly, the broken heel of a woman's shoe, a cat's paw rubber sole, matching the exact style and size worn by Amelia Earhart when she departed La. For decades, this compelling physical proof was dismissed as mere coincidence, but modern science has forced a dramatic re-evaluation of the island's secrets. In 1940, British colonial administrators on the island recovered a partial human skeleton near this very spot. Though those physical bones were subsequently lost in the chaos of the mid-20th century, their detailed anatomical measurements survived. Decades later, world-renowned forensic anthropologist Dr. Richard Jantz utilized advanced quantitative analysis to compare those historical measurements against modern forensic databases. His groundbreaking study concluded that the bones had an astonishingly high probability of belonging to Earhart, possessing a unique skeletal structure nearly identical to the pioneering aviator. But the island's secrets didn't stop with bones and personal effects. Scoured from the storm-swept shoreline were fragments of worked aluminum, custom patch plates, and aircraft rivets. Metallurgical testing of these metal fragments revealed compositions and stress fractures highly consistent with a Lockheed Electra 10E, the very twin-engine aircraft Earhart piloted. It is a compelling, agonizing jigsaw puzzle, suggesting that the Queen of the Air did not perish in a sudden, merciful ocean crash, but instead faced a grueling, weeks-long struggle against the elements. Yet, if the evidence on Nikumaroro is so compelling, why has the scientific community remained so fiercely divided? If Amelia and Fred Noonan indeed made it to this lonely reef, why did the massive U.S. Navy search miss them entirely, and what dark, alternative explanations still linger in the shadows of history? In the decades following the silence over Howland Island, a different kind of static began to fill the global airwaves. Not frantic distress calls, but whispers of conspiracy, geopolitical intrigue, and secret government missions. The most persistent and dramatic of these tales drags us straight into the pre-war tensions of the Western Pacific, painting Amelia Earhart and her navigator Fred Noonan not as tragic, lost aviators, but as captured international spies. According to local legends and sensationalist accounts, the Lockheed Electra veered hundreds of miles off course, crash-landing in the Japanese-occupied Marshall Islands. From there, the narrative claims, the flyers were blindfolded, transported to the heavily fortified island of Saipan, and either executed or kept in brutal captivity. For years, self-proclaimed researchers have pointed to blurry photographs, alleged eyewitness accounts from islanders, and supposed government cover-ups to keep this espionage thriller alive. But when subjected to the cold light of rigorous historical scrutiny, these dramatic stories quickly crumble into dust. In 2017, a highly publicized television documentary claimed to have found a revolutionary photograph in the National Archives, allegedly showing Earhart and Noonan alive on a bustling dock in Jalawad Atoll after their disappearance. Within days, independent investigators blew the theory wide open, proving the photo had actually been published in a Japanese travelogue years before Earhart's final flight even took off. It was a classic case of confirmation bias, a desperate desire to believe a thrilling story overriding basic fact-checking. No Japanese military records, no official diaries, and no physical wreckage have ever been recovered to support the capture theory. Instead, these myths thrive on the addictive allure of sensationalism, transforming a tragic navigational error into a grand tale of military martyrdom. They actively distract us from the grueling physical search and the hard, scientific data left behind in the Pacific. Yet, as we sweep away the fabrications of wartime espionage and photo hoaxes, we are left with a sobering, haunting reality. If she wasn't captured, and if the ocean didn't swallow her instantly, what truly happened in those final, desperate hours? The answer might lie not in the archives of empires, but in the modern-day quest to solve the mystery once and for all. What does the cutting-edge technology of today reveal about the ocean floor, and is the final clue about to be pulled from the deep? The static of the 3105 kHz frequency still echoes across 87 years, a haunting, fragmented puzzle that refuses to be solved. We are left with a handful of undeniable truths. On the morning of July 2, 1937, Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan were flying on instrument-empty reserves, somewhere near the 157 to 337 line of position. Their signals to the Coast Guard cutter Itasca were strong, yet desperately one-way. But when we strip away the decades of romanticized speculation, what does the hard, scientific data actually tell us? Modern radio propagation analysis confirms that those final, frantic transmissions could only have traveled so far. Yet, the limitations of 1937 direction-finding technology meant the Itasca was virtually blind, unable to home in on the voice crying out from the clouds. The ocean in this sector drops to depths of over 18,000 feet, an abyss of absolute darkness where even the most advanced sonar struggles to distinguish a fuselage from a ridge of volcanic rock. This is where the known world ends, and the realm of theory begins. Every expedition that sweeps the seafloor or combs the remote Pacific atolls brings us closer to a statistical probability, but probability is not proof. We are caught in a perpetual loop of search and analysis, where every piece of scrap metal, every blurred sonar image, and every faint radio log is scrutinized under the microscope of hope. The value of this ongoing research isn't just about finding a double-engine Lockheed Electra, it is about our collective refusal to let a historic pioneer vanish into the void without an answer. But as the modern world deploys deep-sea submersibles and satellite mapping to pierce the Pacific's shroud, we must face the most unsettling reality of all: what if the ocean has done its job too well? What if the final piece of the puzzle isn't waiting to be found, but has already been reclaimed by the sea? And if the physical wreckage remains forever out of reach, how do we finally reconcile the tragedy of her loss with the immortal spirit of her journey? If the plane is never found, does the mystery truly end, or does it transform into something far more powerful? How does a vanished pilot become an immortal icon? In our final chapter, we look beyond the salt water and the static to discover how the vanished queen of the sky conquered time itself. The static on the radio eventually faded into a permanent, haunting silence, but the voice of Amelia Earhart was never truly silenced. She did not just fly to break records, she flew to shatter the invisible barriers that bound her generation. In an era when women were told their place was on the ground, Earhart took to the heavens, proving that courage knows no gender. Her legacy is etched not in the tragedy of her loss, but in the millions of minds she inspired to look upward and dare to dream. She became a symbol of defiance, a pioneer who redefined the limits of human capability, leaving behind an indelible mark on aviation and the fight for equal rights. Yet, more than 8 decades later, her final flight remains the ultimate open cold case, an agonizing riddle that refuses to die. Why does this single tragedy hold such an iron grip on our collective imagination? It is because the empty expanse of the Pacific acts as a mirror, reflecting our own deepest fears of the unknown and our relentless drive to uncover the truth. The search for Earhart is no longer just about locating a twin-engine Lockheed Electra, it has evolved into a masterclass in modern forensics, historical detective work, and the vital importance of separating hard, verifiable evidence from the seductive pull of myth. Her disappearance teaches us that the pursuit of truth requires absolute rigor, a willingness to question assumptions, and the bravery to accept that some questions may never have a clean answer. The vast ocean keeps its secrets well, but every expedition, every analyzed radio log, and every scanned deep-sea trench brings us closer to understanding the human cost of exploration. Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan knew the terrifying risks of their journey, yet they strapped themselves into that cockpit and chased the horizon anyway. Theirs is the ultimate testament to the restless spirit of human endeavor, a drive to push beyond the edge of the map, regardless of the cost. As the search continues into the deep blue depths, we are left to wonder, in our high-tech, satellite-mapped world, will we ever finally solve the riddle of the Electra, or is Amelia destined to remain forever just out of reach, calling to us through the static of history? Before you go, here's the thing. Every week we investigate another mystery the world could never solve. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And here's the most important part. The next case we investigate could be yours. Tell us in the comments which unsolved mystery, disappearance, or disaster we should cover next. We read every suggestion, and the stories that stay with you are the ones we bring to life.